India's ties with the Maldives may be at their lowest point ever. There's a full-scale diplomatic war underway with Male, and the Maldivian president is currently cozying up to Beijing. But there's some good news in the neighborhood. In the span of just 48 hours, both Bangladesh and Bhutan went to the polls. Both countries have seen pro-India governments return to power. Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh and Tshering Tobgay in Bhutan. Now, joining me to discuss these developments in the region are General Sanjay Kulkarni, Professor Swaran Singh, and my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul. General Kulkarni, I want to start by asking you, how does having two friendly neighborhood, friendly countries in the neighborhood, pro-India government in the neighborhood help India's foreign policy?
Thank you, Sandeep. In fact, I have no doubt all of them will be friendly to us because all of them understand the expansionist policy of China. All of them know what is a debt trap diplomacy. Yes. And, well, it's just as a part of passing time. All neighbors of India have a long relationship with India, extremely long, be it Maldives, be it Nepal, be it Bhutan, be it Bangladesh, anyone, Myanmar, anybody and everybody, Sri Lanka. Now imagine Sri Lanka, despite what they went along with China, they now seem to realize it.
Absolutely.
That if it hadn't been for India, they would not have come out of the problems that they were in. So it's very, very essential. And we always have said our neighborhood first, and we've always gone about it, not as a big brother, but as equal partners. And in that equal partners and taking them along in all fields, be it infrastructure, be it creating hospitals for them, be it creating, engineering colleges for them.
Absolutely.
Or for that matter, even supplying with water, anything and everything, disaster management. So that is one thing, Sandeep. I'm sure definitely it's a big boon and a nice, good feeling that Bangladesh and Bhutan, both of them, despite the pressures that they were feeling, especially Bangladesh was feeling the pressure from USA on aspects of human rights and not free and fair, all of that set aside. Even USA today feels, yes, Bangladesh, and Bangladesh is closer to China, is closer to India, and definitely they feel that China is developmental and not security. So that's a very big thing, which as a statement has come from their foreign minister, that we respect India and they owe a lot. And Sheikh Hasina's return for the 4th time, I think is a big thing. Welcome step.
Aditya,
whether it is in Bhutan or in Bangladesh.
Aditya, the return of Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh and a pro-Indian government in Bhutan, how does that change things, given the fact that we've been looking at Maldives, the way relationships, the diplomatic ties have nosedived, all thanks to what the Maldivian ministers have been saying. But how does this kind of alter the balance? Is it like 5 more years of stability now?
Absolutely. A stable neighborhood, a peaceful neighborhood is the key to India's foreign policy as well. Ever since Prime Minister Narendra Modi came in 2014, we've had a situation where Prime Minister has emphasized on the neighborhood first diplomacy. Both, in the earlier term when Sushma Swaraj was there, she had a friendly and cordial relations with all the leaders, and that has been taken forward by Foreign Minister Jaishankar. Even though we are emphasizing on Sheikh Hasina and Mr. Tobgay, both who have had personal chemistry and rapport with Prime Minister Modi. But let's not forget Maldives as well. It might have a different government which is pro-China right now, Islamist in their tendency. And with the recent controversy, things may be getting sour. But the entire opposition is friendly with India. Even President Yamin, to a great extent, from time to time, has been closer to India than China. The current opposition, including President Soleh, including Abdullah Shahid, Maria Didi, anybody that we speak about are vociferous supporters of India because they realize that not just does Maldives get the highest number of tourists from India, but the investment, healthcare, humanitarian aid, India is always there first. Similar situation with Bangladesh, where of course you remember history after 1971, India giving shelter to Sheikh Hasina. She will never forget that. She will never forget the creation of Bangladesh itself. There have been some border disputes that have been there. There has been cattle smuggling. There's been a lot of inflow of people that's been coming in. I think those border talks will be underway, but I think Sheikh Hasina recently visited New Delhi and things are very friendly. Similar with Bhutan, we remember the Doklam controversy that actually triggered somewhere around 2016-17, and that was resolved with keen diplomacy between Foreign Secretary Jaishankar at that time and his counterpart in Bhutan. So I think overall, when India is looking at a global power push, a successful G20 has recently concluded, neighborhood, a friendly neighborhood at a time when Afghanistan has erupted, you have Pakistan erupting as well, and Sri Lanka recently has had an economic collapse completely.
Absolutely.
So at that time, this is a glimmer of hope that is coming in for India of a stability.
Oh, glimmer of hope. And Professor Singh, what Aditya just mentioned, this glimmer of hope in our neighborhood first policy, how do these two very friendly pro-India governments in Bhutan and Bangladesh, to an extent, how do they offset the China factor that's been very important in the last decade or so?
I think, Sandeep, glimmer of hope lies in India being seen as emerging power, emerging economy, already fifth largest, slated to be third largest by 2030 or somewhere there. Being world's largest democracy, having a political stability and a strong leader, that is where glimmer of hope lies. But when it comes to China seeking and building certain amount of influence in India's immediate neighborhood, that's a very different story. In 1990, both China and India had about roughly $300 billion of economy. China has reached to almost 20 trillion economy. India is about 3.75 trillion economy now.
Right.
China, with being a single party controlled country, has deep pockets and has therefore built strong commercial economic relationships around the world. Barring about dozen countries, much of the world has China as the largest economic partner, including all the Western nations. Now, that is the also story in India's neighborhood, and that is where we have seen in about last 2 decades a very new phenomenon emerging in India's immediate neighborhood in South Asia. Invariably, you have two political parties, two big leaders, one usually cozying up to China, other being seen as largely closer to India or pro-India. And that is where you're discussing that how in Maldives now we have a president who is seen as pro-China, and of course in Bhutan and Bangladesh, leaders that are seen as pro-India have come back to power.
Right.
Now, difference that we need to really notice here is that India is neither competing nor should compete with China on China's terms.
Right.
Of course, India also is building economic relationship with immediate neighborhood, and example of Sri Lanka is fantastic, where India has really contributed now almost about $4 billion plus of assistance and humanitarian aid and so on, and is now being seen cozying up to India. And the recent is that on yesterday they disallowed Chinese research vessels to enter their economic zone and also anchor on their ports. So India has a very different way of approaching and engaging these nations, which is where India engages with media, with business, with civil society, with politicians, whereas China largely has a commercial relationship centered on regimes, ruling leaders, very limited number. So it's a very different, kind of a equation that India has with these countries and China has with these countries. There is no doubt China's influence in the immediate region has grown up, but it's not that India's relationship has disappeared over a period of time. India has a very different kind of widespread, deep-rooted relationship with most of these immediate neighborhood countries. And sometimes you see these leaders who are seen as pro-China, till recently KP Sharma Oli in Nepal was seen as China leader. So sometime, and that's my last point, sometimes these leaders make these anti-India noises just to demonstrate their loyalty to China. And I think that is how one has to put things in perspective, that sometimes they are demonstrations of loyalty to China rather than really being against India. You notice even in Maldives, India's projects continue. It's not that India's projects have been halted or stopped. India's development projects are continuing in Maldives, except that some of these very unusual, sort of harsh noises are seen, which is unprecedented in some ways. But one has to put things in proportion. It's not that India has disappeared from Maldives.
No, absolutely not. And in fact, the point that you mentioned, Professor Singh, I want to ask General Kulkarni this thing of the difference between the kind of assistance that India gives to Sri Lanka versus what China gives. I mean, China gives debt trap diplomacy, believes in debt trap diplomacy, whereas in India's case, it's more a question of aid, right? We literally bailed Sri Lanka out. How is it that countries like Maldives are rushing into China's arms, knowing full well what happened to countries like Sri Lanka and even not so long ago Pakistan? They're literally, broke trying to pay Chinese loans back.
Sandeep, I would go along with Professor Swaran when he says, we mustn't have a knee-jerk reaction. Even if there are 55% of the votes that may have gone to the Maldivian president, there are 45% people still in Maldives who support India, who understand India, that India is just about 750 kilometers away, whereas Australia is 7,200 kilometers. Pakistan is over 31, China is around 4,200 kilometers. We are just 750 kilometers and they are virtually dependent on us for everything. And so much so that on and off, whenever we would discuss with the Maldivians, they would, say, can you give us some shelter on the western coast of India? You never know, we are just about 1 meter above the sea. And about 80% of the time they're always in, maroon. And they never know when, with the climate change, they just might disappear from this face of the earth.
Yes, it's a country at
there is
great
all kinds
risk.
of things.
Right.
Yeah, because, and the fact that the Chinese have deep pockets, and that's the reason why they are, able to come forward. And all said and done, in our neighborhood, people are like us. They understand that China is not them, but India is them. And that is what makes world of a difference. And again, like the Maldivian president would say, well, we are not China inclined, but we are only looking at, the Maldivian interest first. Whatever be it so, whether it is the Maldivian interest or the Chinese interest, Chinese owing them by billions of dollars that may be invested, and the tourism. Of course, we have a great, about over 2 lakh people, Indians who go as tourists. Equal numbers coming from China. Almost the equal numbers come from Russia. So the 5 lakh population, Sunni-dominated population, they all understand that India is the country from where they can get onions, where they can get cement, from where they get sugar, from where they will get wheat. Is everything coming from India, including vegetables.
And not to forget drinking water as well, as what happened a decade ago.
Drinking water in dire distress. Dire distress. And remember the Operation Cactus. Had it not been for India's instant support and vacating it, immediately thereafter handing over to the Maldivians, the LTT would have been there, sitting on their head. So there's a lot that the Maldivians understand. There's a lot that they know. But yes, these kind of noises are made with a view to gain, popularity, to get maximum kind. And China is looking at it, obviously, just at not even 300 square kilometers of land, but 90,000 square kilometers of the EEZ. That's where the Chinese are looking at. They could have a base. We have just about a few helicopters and a few Dorniers, all that for disaster management for them. All that for the hospitals that we make for them, and everything. They all understand.
China could be looking at a deep water base there.
But then, it's not those petty interests, but in long term, be it Maldives or be it any of our neighborhood, they have lovely, good relationship. People-to-people relationship with our neighborhood is ideal. Government, sometimes, they get wooed by somebody, like in Sri Lanka it happened. He thought Hamban Tota is one of his constituency. He could get made everything, and he then realized what he did to Sri Lanka. Now then, when they realize that, well, China was almost like we are in a debt trap, they come to, India did not ask for it. India offered it. India gave aid not as something wanting to get something in return, but as being good friends, as good neighbors. They all understand. And that's the strength of India. And slowly and steadily we are still building Moldavia. In Maldives, the number of infrastructure projects which are going on. In fact, Mr. Jaishankar just inaugurated one just a year back.
News 9 Plus. Download now.